Hey guys, Brian Hilliard here, author of the best-selling book, Networking Like a Pro, and I am fired up here today because we are joined by Hattie Volecker. She's actually out in the UK. And Hattie, thanks so much for jumping in with us. I know you've got actually a bunch of things going on. You're getting ready to do your 5-day challenge on freeing your voice. So we really appreciate you being able to stop by and spend some time with us.
My absolute pleasure. Yeah, no, I'm building up for the 5-day challenge, which I ran last time in April, and it went down really, really well to try and get singers and other people to free up and be more confident about what they do when they put themselves out there.
Good. Well, that's kind of what we want to talk about here today, putting yourself out there. You know, we met obviously through LinkedIn. And one of the things that I always say is it's so important to get yourself out to a wider audience and obviously expand your reach and do some of those things. One of the things that I always like to do just before we jump in, because I've got a few questions for you, let's just define our terms for our listeners and viewers. When we talk about getting out there, all right, so real quick, we're talking about podcasts, we're talking about webinars, we're talking about Facebook Lives, we're talking about videos, we're talking about live streams, we're talking about, and it doesn't have to be all of those things. You know, one of the things I personally talk about is how you should streamline your platforms and what you're trying to do. But the idea is that, you know, getting out there is simply a conversation about getting out to a wider audience. And that was one of the things that really attracted me to you, is the fact that one of the things that people have a challenge with is overthinking, is this kind of perfectionist tendency. Talk about that, because I know that there's people listening. They don't have to raise their hand, but we can see them. We know they're there.
It's so true. And I come from that background. I used to be a barrister, which is a lawyer who spends all of their time in court in the UK. And it's that idea of every time we put ourselves out there, and that can be one-to-one. If we're going out networking face-to-face, we can feel like we're putting ourselves out there. But especially when we're putting ourselves out there, we were talking about the difference between Facebook Lives and videos, and that idea of Facebook Lives is where you have to go, okay, I'm just going to do it, and press the button and go for it. And you have to have the confidence to be able to do that, which is why so many people avoid it. Video has a different hurdle in the fact that you can get it, in inverted commas, perfect, or people have a feeling that they can get it perfect. And you can take after take after take. And you talked about that idea of being a 5-take person. I'm probably a 1 or 2-take person. You know, you said a maximum of people to say 5 takes, and if you're not done by then just go with what you've got.
Take one of the 5. Take one of the 5. Yeah.
Exactly. And the idea is when we put ourselves out there, we know we're going to be judged. And I'm not going to tell you you're not going to be judged. You are going to be judged. People judge.
Right.
That's what we do.
Right.
We're going to be judged the way we judge ourselves. People judge us by a different standard. So it's that idea of how do you put yourself out there and go, I'm okay. And you don't try and make it perfect. And you don't try and get to that stage where everything's so perfect, because actually what people connect with is humanity.
Yeah, you know, that's a great point. I mean, you saw Willow the cat just swing on by there for a second. I think that part of it is that they're going to be judged, but the truth be told, the judgment that comes from others is, first of all, usually not as harsh as what you judge yourself on. That's number one. And then I think the better point, number 2, is that it also is in the minority. So you hear this idea of the silent majority, right? You hear that in US politics all the time. Oh, there's a silent majority. He's actually going to win at the end. No, he's not. But, you know, the idea is that you have this silent majority or something like that of people who are doing stuff. And I think a lot of times when you're doing video, there's this tendency to think that there's a therapist, there's a psychology term for that. So when somebody says something bad, and you know, blah, 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 and you overstate that in your head to think that that's the majority, when actually the people who are not saying anything all like it, but you don't know that, it's a silent majority, if that makes sense. So it's almost like the opposite. It's like the vocal minority versus the silent majority. And in a lot of times, I've personally found, I mean, you tell me, when I do a video that people actually like, I will find people, they'll put some comments and stuff on there. And then the other thing is, though, people will be like, hey, I got a client the other day who's like, I've been watching your stuff. I'm like, who is this guy? He's a good guy. His name is Philip. He's out in Vancouver. And I'm like, he's like, I was watching your stuff. And he's like, I liked it. I'm like, no disrespect to Philip. I'd never heard of him in my life. I like him now. I mean, no disrespect. So if he's listening or watching, no disrespect. I just didn't know that he existed. But when we got a chance to talk, it was really nice, and to be able to see that. So I think I guess that point there is that there is a lot of overthinking that can take place that can hold people back, and we would argue erroneously.
Yeah, and exactly. So you take judgment, as most people do, as negative.
Right.
You look at the dictionary, it is negative. But actually, people make positive judgments too. They are judging you, but that doesn't mean negatively. And so often we want to control that. And we use perfectionism to try and control other people's judgment. But the truth is, we can't control other people's judgment. We can influence it, but we can't control it. And actually, the more we try and control it, the more that overthinking kicks in. And we think, well, I should do this, and I've got to do that. No, I did that. I'm so annoyed that I did that. And then you get caught up with what you're about to do and what you have done, and you're not in the moment. And I always say, you can't connect with people if you're not in the moment, because your best chance is they're in the moment, you're in the moment. That's where you connect. And that depends on whether they're in the moment. And the other thing, and we'll come on to this later when we talk about my tips for this, is that the idea that we connect with people in a human way, and we connect with people when we are in the moment and we are thinking about what we're doing and what we want to give to these people, not what they think of us. When we start thinking about what they think of us, we start to overthink and try and control.
Great point, Heidi, because I think a lot of times when you're talking about this idea of the perfectionism, when you start talking about this idea of, controlling, I think a lot of people, they're coming at it there's a false premise, in my opinion, my personal opinion, there's a false premise that people buy into when it comes to getting out there in video. And it's quite simply this, that I have to be the best, most perfect, not necessarily over the top, but best, most perfect, person. I have to be Darren Hardy. All right. And, Darren Hardy looks like he's 45, and he's looked like that for 20 years, and it's like, I have to be Darren Hardy, a Success Magazine founder or editor. And it's like, I need to be Darren Hardy. And I like Darren. I have no problems with Darren. But he oh, I need to be Darren Hardy, or I need to be, Tony Robbins is another example, and it's like, I need to be this type, and you don't. What you need to do is be the best version of yourself. And when you're able to do that on a consistent basis, then you're able to be successful. All right, let's